Chapter 19. Through the Rubble. From deep within a pile of rubble that had once been a public library, Blankenship peered through a fallen bookshelf. Using the scope atop a QBU-88 Chinese sniper rifle, removed from one of the many Chinese soldiers he had recently killed, he now stalked the remaining 2 soldiers of the last group that had wandered into his path. For days, Blankenship had stayed on the move, only sleeping a few hours at a time, determined to kill every soldier he could find. Yet it seemed 3 others always replaced his last kill. Though things became easier since figuring out just how to use the Chinese sniper system, the thought of using their own rifles against them always brought a smile to his face. He had grown cold to emotions, and at times even thought about how his humanity was slipping away with every kill. But with each kill, that humanity meant less. Seeing the pink mist fly from those he fired at brought pleasure, and the thoughts of how wrong it was to take a life had stopped mattering countless kills ago. Easing the crosshairs onto the ear of his next victim, Blankenship could feel the rush of endorphins as he anticipated the kill. So far, the 2 had been able to stay alive longer than the other 8 they had been with, but it was mostly just luck of the draw. With a slow squeeze of the trigger, the 5.8mm Chinese round ignited, sending the 70-grain bullet from the barrel at over 3,000 feet per second. Since the soldier was only a little over 400 yards away, it reached the soldier quicker than the endorphin rush Blankenship felt from the click of the trigger that sent it. Then there was one. Never having any formal training as a sniper, Blankenship merely relied on Hollywood getting it right in the many movies he had loved. Since he had always heard in movies to never fire twice from the same place, he slowly backed out from under the bookshelf while keeping a close eye on his prey. The first few times he had done so, it seemed pointless, but after a while he began to enjoy resetting for his next kill. Climbing atop bombed-out buildings had started to become the norm since very few buildings remained intact after the Chinese dropped countless rounds of artillery on the area. From what Blankenship had seen during his time hunting in the area, he had an almost 1-mile stretch of devastation encircling St. Louis, where it had been shelled to create a type of no-man's land. Blankenship took his time, like a child savoring the last bite of a chocolate bar. Experience had told him by now the soldier was much too afraid to move. He had seen it take place normally after the 3rd or 4th in a group would spray pink mist all over them before dropping dead. Working his way into a solid shooting position, Blankenship took a quick look through the scope. "Hello there," Blankenship remarked, seeing the soldier frantically looking all around him, wondering which way to fire. He could see the effects that a sniper had on the psyche, and as he relaxed to take the shot, he understood that he should feel pity for the panicked soldier. Instead, the only thing he felt was his next rush of endorphins as the pink mist sprayed from the man's neck. Releasing the trigger and taking in a deep breath, Blankenship relished in the feeling as it seemed to fade away faster each time. Rolling over to his back, he held the rifle tight, staring up to the blue sky above. During his time on the St. Louis police force, he had seen and dealt with a great number of drug addicts, never really understanding why they would keep doing something that would eventually kill them. Now, feeling the last of the pleasant rush from the endorphins quickly fade away, Blankenship's thoughts turned to the next hunt, and not to Kaylee or the fact his life could be taken as easily as those who had died by his hands. After moving to 3 other locations and each time spending 10 to 20 minutes looking out over his kill, Blankenship moved, satisfied that others had not come to investigate. From the crack of weapons firing in the distance, he knew there were others hunting the Chinese, and at times he could feel himself in their crosshairs, though by now he just chalked it up to being the nature of war. Slinging the rifle over his shoulder, he began his inspection of the 2 soldiers, looking for any information, weapons, ammunition, food, water, or anything else that he might find useful. Another thing Blankenship learned from mistakes he saw in movies was the fact that people were always leaving weapons and ammunition lying on the ground, and then complaining about running out of that very thing minutes later as they fired fully automatic weapons toward the enemy. Blankenship used to laugh at the thought, but now gathering supplies from the dead had become life, and all over the area he had multiple stashes. Taking a drink from the dead soldier's canteen, he looked around as rifle fire erupted in the distance. Somebody's having a worse day. "What do you think, buddy?" he asked the Chinese soldier with a bullet hole through his ear. Taking another sip of the canteen, he listened to the battle that, like most in the no-man's land surrounding St. Louis, only lasted a matter of seconds to a few minutes. With the last shot echoing its way off into the distance, Blankenship began slowly walking away with the bounty from the dead. Now came the moment he had the hardest time with, hiding the weapons, ammunition, and food. It always bothered him, thinking about getting killed by the enemy and having the supplies go unused, since he was the only one who knew of them. Then almost as fast as the thought would creep up, it would be answered with, "That worry won't follow me into death." After the supplies were safely secured and he had a fresh stock of ammunition, Blankenship was back on the hunt, and much like the junkies he used to see in dark alleys, he needed his next fix. With no particular direction in mind, he decided north would most likely provide good game, since he had heard weapons fire within the last 30 minutes. "Let's go see who won that skirmish," he said to himself, after deciding on a direction. 5 blocks over were the remains of an 8-story building, and he knew it would be the best place to possibly spot his next prey. The journey was slow, and at times the smell of the dead almost caused him to turn around. But soon he was at the building and climbing up the many flights of stairs to the top. Blankenship marveled at how the building received so little damage, with the exception of windows being broken and a large portion of the upper left corner missing from artillery damage. That just happened to be the spot he wanted to be in. It was open and offered the best view to the east in the direction of St. Louis. Like many times before, he settled in and began working out in his mind how he would make an emergency exit. Next, he scanned the area below for prey patrolling the area. It was a search that only took a few minutes as a Chinese woman came into his view. She was not the first he had seen, but definitely the most beautiful of them all, especially since the others were now dead. After watching the Chinese troops running around her as she appeared to bark out orders, he quickly came to the conclusion that she was the person in charge. "So sad," Blankenship remarked as he began to take aim. Another thing he believed to be true from watching movies was to identify the chain of command and work down from the top. With soft, subtle movements, he rested the crosshairs upon her breast. Taking a few deep breaths, he began squeezing the trigger as he timed it to fire at the point when he no longer had air in his lungs. With the click of the trigger, everything slowed as the endorphins began to release in anticipation of the pink mist. The release didn't come, nor did the mist. Instead, as he adjusted the rifle and she came into sight, it appeared that she was looking right at him with a smile on her face as a dragon rose behind her. Pulling away from the scope, he rubbed his eyes and reacquired her in the scope. Still, she smiled and appeared to look at him from what he had judged to be about 600 yards. Every muscle in his body screamed for him to run and not take another shot, while another part of him thought, "Sure, no problem. Pull the trigger." The seconds ticked by as he remained captivated by her through his scope. He wondered who she was, even what her name was, and how such a woman could get caught up in this. As he stared and studied her staring at him with such a beautiful, demented smile, he saw the dragon behind her fly into the sky with a ground-shaking thunder. "Artillery," he announced to himself as the realization that he had been led into a trap revealed itself to him. Jumping up into the air like a scared cat from where he lay, he knew it was time for the emergency exit. Swiftly, he secured his rifle and looked down the front of the building where the fire escape began 2 floors down. With the damage the building had suffered prior to today, Blankenship was able to use the collapsed floors much like ramps, and within seconds he was standing on the edge of the building. Alerted by the sound of the fast-approaching shells, he knew his time had run out. Looking up instead of shells, he watched small oriental dragons coming down to strike at the base of the building. The percussion of the explosive was so great that the last thing Blankenship believed he saw was the roof of the building as he flew through the air.